Well, earlier this month, the UN High Commission for Refugees issued a plea for countries worldwide to take in refugees stuck in Libya. The agency described its migrant center in Tripoli as severely overcrowded. But it's not the only camp. Libya is one of the most important transit points for migrants who want to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. Many holding camps are run by smugglers. DW caught up with survivors who escaped to Niger, Libya's southern neighbor. This video contains an advisory. Some viewers may find the images distressing.
These images were recorded by refugees in different camps in Libya. They show appalling conditions. Human rights activists say the images are credible. We came into direct contact with two refugees via messaging services. They've been interned in a Libyan migrant camp for 2 years. They talked to us by voice message. We changed their voices for their own protection.
We have been tortured. We're scared. We're suffering and dying from various diseases. We were kidnapped. We became victims of violence. We're starving. People have died. Our lives are disgusting. So we appeal for our voiceless voice to be heard. We are innocent refugees living in a land of hell.
In Niger, we speak to refugees who went through this hell. One of them is 18 years old. We call her Amina. She was kidnapped while fleeing from Somalia and taken to a hidden building in the Libyan desert. Many others die on the journey across the Sahara. Amina's kidnappers demanded $8,000 for her release. They tortured Amina to increase the pressure. Her parents were forced to listen to it on the phone.
They chained me up, hung me up, and tortured me with electric shocks. They tortured men with electric shocks to their genitals and women with shocks to their breasts until they cried and screamed loudly. They did it so they would get the money faster.
The torture is systematic. Many other refugees describe similar methods. About 1,600 refugees live in this camp south of the Sahara. They were all rescued from Libya. This man from Sudan doesn't want to reveal his true identity either and asks that we call him Ibrahim. He says when he was in prison, he was sold.
People came and bought us like slaves. And they said, "We'll let you work and you get money for it." But in the end, you didn't get any money. They said you're a slave, you're a black man. They even woke us up in the middle of the night to torture us.
These are horrific stories we're hearing from refugees inside this camp. They say in Libya they've seen and experienced things they couldn't even have imagined before. Now here in Niger they feel safe for the first time. But life's not easy here too. All they hope for is a quick resettlement to a safe country. Many hope to reach Europe. We managed to meet someone who profits from the refugees' suffering. He calls himself Abdelaziz. Occupation? Migrant smuggler. For $500, he brings migrants across the Sahara to Libya. But if they can't pay, the drivers sell them to torture chambers. Abdelaziz understands why they do that.
They say I spent money on you. What am I supposed to do? I want my money back and I want profit on top of that. That was when they started torturing people.
We often hear refugees say that they're not put off by stories like this. The smugglers are their only hope, and they're prepared to pay any price, even if it means risking their lives.
Marielle Müller, one of the authors who put that report together, is with us now in the studio. Good morning, Marielle.
Good morning.
That was a very moving report, some very disturbing first-hand accounts that you found there, people being sold to extortionists who use torture. Is there any way to tell how common that is?
It's very difficult to say, actually. As you just said, the smuggler that we met and that we interviewed also in the report, he says that sometimes refugees come to his drivers and say, you know, I don't have any money, but I want to travel through the Sahara Desert to Libya. I have a friend in Libya who will pay for me. But then they arrive there and there's no friend. So the drivers search for other possibilities to get the money. And so they sell them to these torture chambers. And then they torture the migrants so that they get the ransom from their families back home. But I also spoke to migrants who told me, well, that's simply not true. I paid for my travel. And I ended up in these torture chambers anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now what about international investigators getting into Libya and looking into all of this? I mean, these are grievous crimes, really, against the most vulnerable of people. Is there any push for police from any agency, I'm thinking about Interpol, for example, to get into the camps?
Well, until now, that doesn't happen. There's no such thing as an international investigators getting into these torture chambers because they are operating in the hidden. Nobody really knows where exactly they are. Of course, there are some known hubs, smuggler hubs, where you know, okay, there are some, but these are private homes, sometimes underground, so you don't, even the refugees who escape from them, they don't know where they were. But the international community is aware of the problem. They know what's happening in there. They are also aware what's happening in the Libyan detention centers, for example. Mm-hmm. The United Nations, the UNHCR, actually are evacuating people from there to Niger, but also to Europe. But there are some other detention centers where nobody is there. So everything can happen to them. And the reason the United Nations says we are not there is that they say we don't have access to the detention centers. The government-run detention centers don't let us in. But I talked to a humanitarian worker from Doctors Without Borders. He said we had no problem in getting into these centers. We don't know why the United Nations are not there.
So it would be possible for international investigators, for Interpol, for example, to follow this story, run it down, see what's happening with these extortionists?
Well, as I said, it's very difficult to find them. You know, Libya is a war-torn country. There's no structure of security, so it's very difficult, I think, for investigators to get
anyone
to anyone
to do that. Okay, yes. Now. The smugglers that are working, the people traffickers, are they part of larger networks?
There are these networks. They start their work in the home countries of the refugees, so for example, Eritrea, Sudan, Somalia, and they reach to Libya or even to Italy sometimes. And they work very professionally. They hand over the migrants at the borders. There are also rival gangs who kidnap migrants from one group to another. But I also talked to a guy who worked, who did this job of transporting migrants through the Sahara Desert since decades. He says it was a normal job before 2015 when a law was passed and the European Union put pressure on the government of Niger to close the border, of course, in order to prevent migration to Europe. So you can say in some points that the first European border to Africa is now in Niger.
Okay, and human trafficking and smugglers, that's your next report. You'll be looking into that for us as well, looking forward.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're looking forward to seeing that too, Marielle. Thanks very much for coming in. Marielle Müller for us on this story.